Dyson Daniels, the Hawks' two-way stalwart guard. He was the defensive player of the year, runner-up, all defensive first team, as well as the most improved player of the year. He's reached agreement 4 years, $100 million rookie contract extension. His agent, Daniel Moldovan, tells me here today.
That's ESPN senior insider Shams Charania with the news of Tuesday morning, the rookie extension deadline about to hit as we record this episode of the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. And Dyson Daniels has got himself a nice bag to move into the 2025-2026 season. It is the night before Christmas for basketball fans. The NBA season gets started on Wednesday morning on ESPN with a doubleheader. Nothing but net pregame. You'll have that from 10 a.m. on ESPN and, of course, Disney Plus as well. As I mentioned, this is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane Pittman, Olga Nulic here. Olgs, it is great to see you, and we're going to break through not just some of the names that we know are going to be in the NBA, but some intriguing storylines that we've found along the way. And look, we weren't going to talk a lot about the NBL, but we need to talk about Bryce Cotton, and in particular, a Perth Wildcats team that they can say what they want, but they should have a whole heap of regrets from what we've seen over the last few months.
Now, look, the Bryce Cotton Perth Wildcats situation is very funny. Optically, it is a hilarious situation. But, man, Dyson Daniels had us down to the wire. They got to the deadline. And it just seemed like, do we think Daniel Moldovan just got Giddey's contract and just changed the name and then changed the team and then just maybe change the bonus from most improved player to defensive player of the year and just said, hey, Dyson, go ahead and sign this?
Well, I think Moldovan is a man who likes to work in square numbers. 4 years, 25 per, $100 million. And I know, we're talking about the difference between millions of dollars, but 100 sounds better than 99. But let's get straight into that deal. We've got more storylines regarding Jock Landale. We will talk about Josh Giddey and whether or not he can make his 4-year, $100 million contract a bargain. Matisse Thybulle, will he get traded to a contender? So we've got a few names that we want to rip through, but this is the breaking news. As you're watching us on YouTube or listening on your podcast platform, get involved in the comments. What do you think of the deal? Who wins this? Because I think that is the talking point here. So 4 years, $100 million. Instant reactions, Olgs, because I must admit, I looked at the $100 million and where that ranks across the players. It's in the mid-70s heading into this year, $25 million. You've got a guy who, based on what we saw last year, the best perimeter defender in the NBA, only 22 years of age, going to get better. What was your instant reaction? There was certainly some speculation that there was haggling between 5 years, 150, 5 years, 115. Ultimately, they settled for one less year and the guaranteed cash.
This is, it sounds boring, but this is team friendly. This is player friendly. Again, for Dyson Daniels, this is arguably the best defender on earth. It's one of the best defenders in the world. So obviously he's worth a certain amount of money, and you see the potential with him. Like you said, only 22 years of age. There's secondary ball handling there. They know what he is, right? He's proven to that franchise. And for the team, it gives them a little bit of flexibility that they didn't have to go and shell out $30 million for someone like Dyson Daniels, who I think is similar to Giddey in that they had done too much to not pay them this sort of money. But they hadn't done enough, or there are still enough questions where it's like, giving the full max or giving the full 30 is still a little bit scary. And so I feel like for both of those guys, there is like a happy medium there. And for Dyson Daniels especially, man, if he can show just that secondary ball handling, and if the jump shot can can continue to improve, this is an absolute bargain of a deal. But right now, absolutely team friendly, player friendly, good deal for everybody.
It must have been a scary 24 to 36 hours for Dyson and his team as they continue to work through this, because, on one hand, I look at the $100 million and I'm like, if Dyson Daniels is who I think he is, which is already a top 3 guard defender in the league, and as you pointed to, you can make the case for perimeter defenders and how difficult it is to guard these offensive players, the best defender in the world. Thought he should have been Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe this year he can go and grab that award. You think, damn, if you've got a skill to that level, like we're not just talking elite, we're talking the best, then $25 million, it feels like this is a little under. But why would they go down this path? So 5 years, 150, again, we're going off the reports, multiple reports around this. 5 years, 150, that is the $30 million per year. The Hawks, potentially a little lower, 5 years, 115, that's around 23 per year. That's far too low. So if you're Dyson Daniels now, you take the 4 years, so you don't have to worry about playing basketball this year and you tear an ACL, you break your leg, something horrific goes on, knocking on all the wood as we do this podcast. Now he has the guaranteed 100. He hits free agency at the age of 26. But if we just look at the numbers, he one most improved player because he went from 5 points per game up to 14. Three-point shot continuing to work, but we've already seen in preseason physicality, confidence can get downhill. He's not going to be the lead ball handler, I don't think, at any point in his career, but we've seen the offensive game continue to grow, which is why he won that most improved player. If he stays at this level defensively, which there's no reason why he shouldn't, as we said, he's 22 years of age, and then the scoring on a very good Atlanta team that wanted flexibility financially later on, gets that to 16, 17, 18 points per game, then this will be an underpay, and he will get himself in line down the road to make some serious cash. And we're talking, arguably the greatest contract in Australian basketball history. And I thought if he did play this season and things went the way that I think they could, then he probably would have signed a deal greater than that Ben Simmons. But ultimately, when you have the $100 million guaranteed right there and you can grab it and now you can play with confidence that you're financially secure, your family is set for life, that's going to be a pretty damn good feeling.
Yeah, two things. The first is, by the time he's 26, 27, he's going to get onto that third contract. He's theoretically not even going to be entering his prime yet.
Yeah.
So lock in this $100 million now and be safe with it. That's number one. Number two is you look at the core of this Atlanta Hawks team, and yeah, it's Trae Young and you've got Kristaps Porzingis sort of sandwiching. What I think is it's like actual core, the trio of youngsters, which is now Dyson Daniels, it's Zachary Risachet, and it's Jalen Johnson. And you have these three players who are now locked in for multiple seasons. And it's like a sentimental thing for Dyson Daniels that, yeah, I'm part of this young core moving forward for this franchise. And no matter what happens to Trae Young, no matter what happens to Kristaps Porzingis or the bench, which is now retooled, we are the core. So I think it just helps psychologically. I think it helps the team psychologically. The sentiment is that Dyson Daniels is part of this young core moving forward, and he doesn't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson, you pointed to, missed a bunch of basketball last year. He's at 30 mil per year. So if you're sitting at home and you're wondering what the comparison looks like for his own teammates, that's a comparison there to watch over the next few years. We think both guys are highly talented and they are a ferocious duo, great athletes, the way that they can help this Atlanta team. By the way, I'm very high on the Hawks. I don't think that there's any way that they should be fearful of Detroit. I don't think there's any way they should be fearful of Orlando. So I think they're a team that's pretty well balanced now, extremely talented. The East is weak. So the Hawks, I think, are going to be able to make some moves. Let me ask you a question, though, because you mentioned the Giddey contract, the Dyson contract, which I think is, it's kind of unique. You think about two guys that have known each other forever, and now in the space of 6 weeks, they both sign a 4-year, $100 million contract. Giddey just turned 23, Dyson not 23 till next year. There are so many similarities here. It's awesome for Australian basketball. But, we can't just have these conversations and say, yes, well done. I'm asking you right now, you get to choose one player for the next 5 years. Who are you taking? Dyson Daniels, Josh Giddey?
Why would you do that to me? What a horrible question to throw.
You could have asked me, but you didn't think of it, Hulk. So who are you taking?
Oh my goodness, you're gonna get me in so much trouble.
Bad luck.
I'm gonna take Josh Giddey because I think it's more difficult to find a big point guard who can run a team as opposed to finding someone who can be a complementary wing guy who can guard. You can go and get an Aaron Naismith or an Alex Caruso, and you can make that work. Whereas finding that big ball carrier who has a ton of potential, I think that is more difficult. But way to get me in trouble. Who are you picking? Pick one.
No, I would take Dyson, yeah. Because I just think if you have one guy that has an absolute all-world skill, and Josh Giddey, elite facilitator, but we already know Dyson's only 22 and he's already second in Defensive Player of the Year, most improved player. Significant growth still to come, I think, offensively. But let's go to Josh Giddey now. It's the perfect segue to get there. I think either way, the teams are probably going to be feeling really good about the deals that they made there. And we think that both guys, as you pointed to, entering their prime, have a chance to make more money. So Josh Giddey, I think he's intriguing this year because the Bulls, to me, are not where the Hawks are. I think they're a couple of rungs below, and they're probably still trying to figure out what it is they're doing. So you got Josh Giddey, you got Kobe White, you got Dosunmu, coming off the bench. Are those three guys core guys at the guard position? Is Kobe White and Josh Giddey a backcourt that can defend to a level that can help you be really, really competitive against the best team? So I'm going to frame it this way. And these are conversations that I have with people when we go to games here in the States. And we look at it differently. We've watched Josh Giddey from his time in the NBL. We've watched him continually get better. We've seen him play at an unbelievably high level for a Thunder team. Situation didn't work out. And I think around the NBA, people that maybe just watch the game dinged him a lot in terms of where his stock sits and what he can be without actually thinking about the facts that he is still so young and entering year 5. So these are some of the questions that always get posed when it comes to Josh. So can he help a winning team as, probably their third guy? And if you paid 4 years, 100 mil, and we're talking at a contender status, so that's one question. Can he be impactful off the ball? We saw the 3-point shooting improve a little bit, but I think that's going to be key on a really good team. And then can he defend to a league average level or a little bit over? I think those are the questions that he will have to answer for everyone to look at this and say, man, the Bulls also got a bargain here with Josh Giddey and this deal.
Yeah, so let's go in reverse order. Can he guard at a good level? I think there have been glimpses, especially in this preseason, of him being able to guard a little bit better. I think his body has changed a lot, especially since he first got into the league, where he has added a lot of size. I think there's an uptick in athleticism, even if it's not completely notable. It is still to the level where I think he can guard at the level. So I think that, and again, the size is still there. You can't teach the size. So I think there's potential for him to be able to guard at the very least at an average level, which is really all you sort of need, right? If that's your baseline, then that's okay. The second thing is the jump shot. It has improved every single season since he's been in the league, up to the point where it got to 38%. Last season. Now, there was the stretch toward the end of last season, which I think was anomalous, right? He shot it at an exceptional level from beyond the 3-point line, but he has shown demonstrable improvement year on year since he got to the league. There hasn't been a year where he's dipped, and so you would trust that, hey, that is a good indicator of development, that he can continue to get better. And then can he impact winning? That's the open question. That's the question that we don't know about. We will see what this Bulls team looks like. It looks largely the same. Yeah, you have Isaac Okoro coming in. Yes, we're expecting some sort of leap from Matisse Thybulle. We're expecting a leap from Josh Giddey. We'll see, 1 year on with this sort of core together, I don't know if a Giddey Vucevic tandem is something that this team is looking at long term.
They want to get rid of him. Let's be honest. He's been there for
they've
too
been
many
trying
years.
to
They
get
want to
rid of
move
him.
on. Come on.
They've been trying to get rid of him for years. The Giddey Zach Collins tandem I thought was really interesting. So it sucks that Collins is out to start the season, but there are interesting duos and interesting combinations in this team. And if Matisse Thybulle can take a leap, the question is, can Giddey then be the point guard that leads them out of the plane? I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago and for a story on ESPN.com.au, and he spoke about the fact that we don't want to sit in the middle. We hate sitting in the middle. They've been a play-in team 3 seasons in a row. They can't sit there. And the 4-year, $100 million deal for Giddey is a show of intent for this team, saying, we think you're the guy who can get us out of mediocrity. And Giddey wants to get them out of that. So for his sake, hopefully he can do that. Because if he can impact winning, that's the thing that will justify the contract.
So I mentioned it with Dyson. So the Giddey, the $25 million right now, this is from Basketball Reference, has him as the 76th highest paid player. But I was kind of looking through that list and looking at some other contracts that really for both guys, I think they tie in together.
How mad are you that didn't say the 67th, by the way?
No.
So you can get another 6-7 reference in here.
Yeah, I said it once, and honestly, that was...
You said it twice, my man.
Did I?
76, go ahead.
two times too many. But when I did hear Andrew Gaze, also go with that joke, I felt a little bit better. But anyway, 76th highest player in the league. Some of the contracts that I was looking at. So Jalen Green's paid 33. That goes up to 36 by 2028. Jalen Suggs is around the 35 mark. Desmond Bain, 36. And then De'Aaron Fox, 37. Up to 61 mil in 2030. So, these guys, those guys, a couple of those guys on their second deal as well. But I do think that those are the type of players that both of these guys in different ways, they should be putting themselves in that class to be in that mix. So I think that as we go through these guys, these are some of the storylines. Yes, we've seen the best of them. But for Giddey, it's like, all right, you had a great end to the season. We've seen you do it as a rookie and a second-year guy in OKC. So now the challenge is you got paid. So both of these guys set for life. But if we know anything about these guys, they're not satisfied in that. So it's about getting to the next level. They're at the age that they can still do that. And we'll see whether they can, by the time those few years are done, they join those types of players there. But either way, it's pretty cool for Australian hoops. Think about having 2 more guys that are in that $100 million bracket range. Move on to... No, go on.
My last point on it, and
good.
I'll be quick. It's something I spoke with Luke Longley about recently, and it was... The cool thing about Giddey and Dyson is that what they excel at are 2 very Australian things. So Josh Giddey is an elite passer, right? He's unselfish. He's a selfless basketball player, moves the ball. That is a very Australian thing. And then Dyson Daniels is an up and in gritty defender. So you have these two elite point guards who are now $100 million players in the NBA who are really, really cool and honorable representations of Australian basketball. And that's a very cool thing.
Very well said. I'll be in Chicago next week, and they play each other, and I have to imagine they're just going to be looking at each other on the side of the court, going, "You're $100 million man. I'm $100 million man. How good is life now at the start of this NBA season?" I think one of the interesting players is going to be Jock Landale, and I want to frame this a little bit differently because if we look at where the Australian basketball landscape sits for big men, I do think Jock Landale needs to play some basketball. He's been in some really interesting spots in the NBA when you think from coming in San Antonio, then going to Phoenix, then going to Houston. It's always felt like at the time it looks like a good situation. And then something happens where it just feels like the luck hasn't been on his side, despite the fact I would argue that he's proven himself as a pretty solid backup big in the NBA. But he's going to start this season. The Memphis Grizzlies have got all kinds of injury concerns. Jock Giddey still a few weeks away from coming back and playing basketball. Jaren Jackson going to miss some time to start the season, and Brandon Clark still coming back from surgery. So he's going to start on opening night on a team that's going to try and be competitive. And, I don't know where they sit in the Western Conference, but I do think it's really important to watch how Jock Landale can take advantage of this situation. Not too far from turning 30 years old. He'll be 32, 33 by the time the World Cup, Olympics come around. I think he needs to play. And I'm glad that he's in this situation where he'll at least get that crack at the start of the season.
Yeah, this was a bit of a prove-it deal for Jock Landale. Like, he knew that he was signing with this Grizzlies team with the opportunity to potentially start, and then obviously all these injuries continue to happen, and now he's the surefire starter. So he starts over Santi Aldama, and over the preseason so far, we've seen glimpses of what he's going to be able to do. He's stretching the floor a little bit more. But it was like you said, it's a bit unfortunate because over the past few seasons, the glimpses we have seen have been pretty impressive, especially last season. Every time he got an opportunity for the Houston Rockets, he was able to be really effective, not just as like a producer, but he impacted winning for that team. They went on a really substantial winning stretch toward the end of the season. He was a big part of that. But it was unfortunately just because Steven Adams didn't really play back-to-backs. And so Jock Landale got to step in there. And then when the playoffs came, Steven Adams was the guy who came off the bench for them.
Yeah.
Now, Jock Landale is the guy. He is the only center on this team right now, effectively. Jaren Jackson Jr., I think he's played a bit of preseason, but he plays primarily at the 4 anyway.
Yeah.
So you have a tandem there. And look, it's a Grizzlies team that is sort of perennially injured. And so I don't know if they're going to be in a position to win games consistently, but if Jock Landale can impact winning like he's shown glimpses of in the past, then this could be a stepping stone into a bigger contract next season, which I think is what everyone's thinking about.
Yeah, over the course of last season, 13 minutes, 5 points, 3 rebounds. Now, half of those rebounds on the offensive glass, we know he's just a guy, he's an absolute workhorse, and that's what makes him good. Hasn't shot the ball all that well from 3 in his NBA career. Do you think that he needs to play, whether it's NBA or beyond next year leading into the World Cup? Is that something you're concerned about? Because I am looking at the big man, and I do think we've got a big gap between Magnay, who you really worry about the health, thought he was good at the Olympics. Reith is in an interesting position in Portland. Is he going to play? And to me, Jock Landale's still going to be a lock because not only has he proven it in those FIBA tournaments, but he brings that asshole in the best possible way to this Boomers team. I think they need that attitude. They've got a lot of young guys, and he's like the old school, willing to bring that competitiveness. So any concern about just the not playing a lot over the next 2 years?
There was an issue over the Olympics of guys going into camp a little bit underdone because they hadn't played many minutes. So that was a legitimate thing. I think Patty Mills was a good example of that. He started off real slow, and ideally you don't have guys doing that going to a Boomers camp.
Joe Ingles, and they spoke about it.
Ingles.
And then there was the other side
sure.
of it,
Gorge
which
was open about it.
Yeah, and then the other side of that was a guy like Josh Green who came into camp exhausted coming off the NBA Finals, and he's had a really bad run of luck after that. So I just think it is something interesting to watch with the Boomers. They've got a bunch of guys that are carrying some stuff and really struggling to get on the floor, from Exum and Matisse Thybulle, who we're going to talk about next, and now Josh Green as well. And Landale generally healthy but needs to play. So it's definitely something to track, I think. We do need these guys to be playing basketball. And I know it's challenging when you're in the best league in the world, but we don't want guys just in the league. We want them in positions where they can continue to get better.
Yeah, and obviously the World Cup is 2 years away. right?
Yep.
So this isn't a concern for this season. But again, we've also seen the opposite of guys who have played really good basketball and then that has bled into a really good tournament. I remember Xavier Cooks at the World Cup a couple
Yeah.
of years ago, where he played really good basketball and then that led into the World Cup where he was one of Australia's best players. So again, it's not something that we have to be concerned about right now, but it is something to note going forward. Gorge mentioned it throughout the entire campaign. It is optimal for these guys to be playing consistent basketball going into an Olympic or a World Cup campaign for sure.
Matisse Thybulle, you mentioned that you were curious to see whether he's a guy that gets traded later in the season. Portland's really nice young core, but Thybulle potentially still a guy that contenders would covet. He's in the last year, 11.5 million in this player option year for him, so he will be a free agent, so expiring deal, and just a really tradable number. Do you think he's going to get traded? Yes or no, Ogs? Let's get off the fence again. I thought you did well with the Giddey and Daniels question. So, while you're heating up, well, tell us, Matisse Thybulle, is he on the Blazers by the time the playoffs roll around?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Why would he still be there? Like, and I'll put it like this: I think he'll play for the Blazers. I think he'll get minutes for them. I think he's obviously good enough to do that. The last 20 games of last season were elite from Matisse Thybulle. He shot the ball at a crazy level. And the problem is, if he does anything close to that this season, then there's really no reason for this Blazers team to keep him. And I think there is every reason for a contender somewhere else to look at him and say, here is an elite defender. Man, if he's shooting the ball at a high level, cool. We have a 3-and-D guy, someone who can play meaningful minutes. We trust him to play in the playoffs, and it's on an expiring contract. So we will give a first-round pick, or we might give a young asset for that. And if you're the Trailblazers, why would you want to keep Matisse Thybulle's expiring contract? So the answer is the smart money is that no, he's not going to be on the Trailblazers, not for anything that he's going to do outside of him being probably pretty good and a contender saying, we want that.
He's only 28, but he's had these nagging knee issues. You mentioned he didn't make his season debut last year until March 16. He hasn't really played in the preseason as well. So a lot of it is on health. You pointed to the shooting, but in those 15 games last year, he was just an absolute chaos merchant. He still had 5 games of 3+ steals in those 15. He had 1 block in 8 of those from the guard position as well. So he's a chaos creator. I am curious. I don't know whether the Boomers have past him, though, when you think about some of the athletes they have. And I know he's a much-loved character in Australian basketball, but Daniels, we know, is already elite. They're different type of guys, and you have the young core, and I wonder what direction they want to go when, Thybulle will be nearly 30 at that point. Johnny Furphy, Jalen Galloway, go down the list. Tyrese Proctor maybe is a bigger guard. Not saying those guys are Matisse Thybulle level defenders. Don't get that twisted, but they have got some nice stocks in those wing positions there. So that'll be a conversation I reckon we're going to have a few more times, Ogs.
Yes, but it's.
And also, he might want to tell the Boomers to get stuffed as well. Like we don't know, how he personally feels.
Look, that is true. I do think that the relationship is mendable there, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. But I don't think any of the names you mentioned are going to be the reason why Matisse Thybulle might not make a Boomers team going forward. I think it might be because of the guy that we're about to talk about next.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you said that because I have got some pretty
One
sharp...
naturalized player. Remember it.
I know. I have got some pretty sharp feedback every time, and I've been campaigning that if this came down... And by the way, Wildcats-Cotton on Instagram yesterday had that beautiful, crisp Australian passport in his hands. So he was fired up. It finally came through. I've always thought that Bryce is a guy that should be on the Boomers because I think it's been a missing skill set. Maybe less so when Patty Mills was there. We don't think he's going to be there in a couple of years' time. So Bryce, I want to frame this from the Perth Wildcats point of view, though, because Bryce has maybe chipped a few little comments towards the Perth Wildcats. I don't know the ins and outs of the relationship. We understand that it certainly soured on the back end last year. And we discussed this before we knew that Bryce was leaving. We had a strong suspicion that he might. We thought maybe he'd go overseas and really take some cash. Speaking of, Trevor Gleeson will be on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops later this week. He's got some information about this whole situation and how it went down. But, I said this from the John Rillie extension. Bryce Cotton is not your normal import. Bryce Cotton is not your normal player. We are at the point where Bryce Cotton is getting to the stage where if he plays in the NBL for a couple more seasons, 3 more seasons, maybe gets another 2 MVPs based on the way he's playing, he's so far ahead in the race right now, it's not funny. You're not just talking about the conversation everyone's had 1 billion times, is he the best import? You're asking where he sits all time out of all players and where he sits in comparison to Andrew Gaze. Like, that's how good this guy is. So the fact that the Wildcats did not incorporate this guy in terms of their coaching decisions, then they're giving him a timeline of where he needs to sign. If you've got a guy this good, Olgun, you let him decide when he wants to decide, and you don't worry about roster building. You say, well, here's the money. Whatever you want, we're going to make sure that we have it there because we understand that you are irreplaceable. And now the Wildcats are in damage control. But, man, if I'm a Wildcats fan, I'm furious watching this guy drop 50 for the Adelaide 36ers.
So here is my defense of the Perth Wildcats, and it's not what you think it's going to be.
It's indefensible.
No, it's not what you think it's going to be. Bryce Cotton was not returning to the Perth Wildcats.
No, but he wasn't. But why was he not returning to the Perth Wildcats? Because the relationship had soured along the way.
The relationship had absolutely soured,
and that's on them.
That is why I do think it's on them. I think it's on Mark Arena, the owner and the chairman, and I think it's on Danny Mills. It is partially on John Riley, but I think it more so on the management. Right, the relationship with those two especially soured, and so Bryce Cotton, from what I understand, he was not going to return to the Perth Wildcats. So the idea of they put a deadline on him, and they should have waited.
That's the final salt in the wound. Like you've already lost this guy.
It feels like that feels just like them trying to just put some optics out there of like, oh, this was our decision.
Bad optics. That's what they are.
It's not great. Look, it's not great optics all round. I think it would have been so much easier for Bryce just to say, "Hey, look, I want to go somewhere else. I really don't want to be in Perth anymore. I'm not a fan of management. I'd like to move on." That's the reality of the situation. And I think if the Perth Wildcats just said, "Hey, look, like we have a feeling, we have an understanding that Bryce probably wants to assess his options elsewhere, so we're going to do the same thing." Instead of putting out this like pretend situation of there was a deadline and Bryce didn't meet it, and so then Bryce felt disrespected by it. I just think that's all for show on a situation of just like two parties that just didn't mesh anymore. And so I feel like that's one thing. Again, if you're the Perth Wildcats, when new ownership comes in and when management is there, it probably should be your priority to make sure that the best player in your franchise's history, and arguably the greatest player in the league's history, is happy in his situation. And you do everything you can to appease him and to make sure that he feels comfortable in that situation. Because like we're seeing, it is not easy to get imports. It is not easy to get high-level imports because while Bryce Cotton is dropping 50 pieces right now for the Adelaide 36ers, right in the shadows, Mason Jones is being cut by the Perth Wildcats. And so it is optically just such a horrible situation for the Perth Wildcats, who can't retain an import because he's just unfortunately not at the level, while the import that they let walk is doing the stuff that we know he's capable of doing, which is being the best player in the league by a country mile.
Yeah, and by the way, like even if it's fake, it was real. The deadline, it seems like from what Bryce has said, it annoyed him even further. And let's not forget, they didn't even sign Mason Jones until September anyway. A couple of weeks before the season, they gave him a 1-month holiday in Perth and then sent him packing. So, yeah, I just think if you come in, new ownership, you've got a layup when you've got a guy, as you pointed to. Just make sure that this guy is happy and make sure he stays around because it's not only that, it's tickets. Everyone wanted to watch this guy. His box office, and we already see the crowds don't look the same to me. I don't have the official numbers, but if I'm a Wildcats fan, I'm like, why am I spending this money going to watch after you got rid of this guy, and now he's playing in Adelaide, dropping 50. And I don't know who the number 2 seed is in the NBL. The league is, look, there's been blowout central, so it's hard to get a read on it. Melbourne clearly number 1. I've probably got Adelaide number 2 just purely based on this guy. The most undefendable guy in the league that, yes, the Sydney Kings did a good job. Then he drops 40.5 points per game in a double last round. So it's just, I just watch it. And I'm like, I love watching the guy play. He's a superstar, and it should have been a layup. And you can't let the relationship sour to this point. And more importantly, if he wants to go somewhere else, make sure he goes to Japan. Don't let this guy go to a rival team in the league. It's just, it's organizational malpractice, Olgan, and the Wildcats fans probably have every right to be annoyed and be frustrated by this. We are going to wrap this pod up. Any last quick thoughts on the NBA, a guy that you want to mention in a word or two to watch? We've got a bunch of storylines. We're looking forward to the season getting going.
Do you think Lockie Ulbrich has potential to maybe find a minute or two with the Chicago Bulls with Zach Collins out for a little bit? They've got Vooch there, they've got Noah Sengu there, but can Lockie Ulbrich? Do you think he can find some minutes, or do you think it's a bit too much of a long shot? I'm just thinking aloud here. I haven't thought deeply about this yet.
I think it's a bit of a long shot, but I don't think the Bulls are going to be a team that's going to be a top 6 seed in the East. So hopefully they do something with Vucevic and just lean into the young guys. And then the back end of the season, you want to see what you got, and you want to see whether you want to bring him back. So he looked good in Summer League. It would be fun to see him play. I think, we've discussed Furphy a lot. We've discussed Tyrese Proctor a lot. Steven Adams, by the way, I mentioned that opening night, Rockets OKC, going to be starting in the tallest starting lineup potentially in the history of the game with Amen Thompson at the point guard position. So make sure you check out that game. But cool day, Ogs. Cool day when you saw the notification come through. We knew that the Hawks and Dyson were working towards this, but man, it would be nice. Imagine that. 4 years, 100 million. Jeez, beautiful day.
I can imagine it. And look, credit
You
to
can't.
I can.
Well, maybe you can. I don't know your personal finances, but okay.
We don't ask questions. Credit to Daniel Moldovan, who made sure that these two very good friends cannot bicker with each other for the next 4 seasons because they have the exact same deal. So that's smart thinking from Moldovan there.
That's the only setback I think for Moldovan. Like we're all Australians. Like with your best mates, you want to be able to talk a little bit of trash and get stuck into
Give one of them $1 million more.
Yeah,
give
1 million.
Give him $1 million. Give me a 4-year 101.
Just a little gap. Either way, as I said, let us know on YouTube or social media what you thought. NBA season is back. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lots more NBL to discuss as the weeks go on as well on the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Rate, review, get involved in the show. We appreciate when you do it. And as I said, ESPN Disney Plus, NBA season getting underway Wednesday morning. Make sure you check it out from 10 a.m. Nothing but net pregame for myself, Kane, and the man Olgun Ulic with a very, very nice background today at the ESPN studios in Melbourne. That'll do it. We'll see you next Tuesday.